Are you a parent, grandparent, rich auntie, or trusted family friend who will be cruising with kids who may or may not be your own? You might think it's as simple as packing them up and heading out, but cruising with kids requires extra planning and sometimes extra paperwork that you might not think about and could cause you to get denied boarding. This is especially true if you're traveling with kids with whom you are not the legal guardian. Hi, I'm Rocky, and in this video, I'm going to go over 7 important things for you to consider before cruising with the kiddos. If that sounds like something for you, then you're in the right place, so let's get into it. So first, let's start with the basic question of just who is considered a child when it comes to cruising. Generally speaking, most cruise lines consider a child to be between the ages of 0 to 17 years old, but there are a few caveats. Usually, infants between the ages of 0 to 6 months are not allowed to cruise. Infants between 6 months to a year are allowed to cruise, but with certain exceptions, such as they are not allowed to go on longer cruises, which usually means a cruise that has 3 or more consecutive sea days, or transatlantic cruises. Also, some people think that when they're cruising in international waters, the legal drinking age is 18, but no, it's still 21. Every child is going to need an acceptable form of citizenship or proof of identity in order to board their cruise ship. Just like with adults, if the cruise is a closed loop cruise, meaning that it begins and ends in the same U.S. port, then the child may be able to cruise with an original or certified copy of their birth certificate. Now, as I've said before, it's always best if you can to have a passport, because if something were to happen when you're out of the country and you need to fly back, having a passport makes that so much easier. But I understand not everybody can or wants to have a passport, so just knowing what's required is important. I strongly suggest that you check with your cruise line and see what they require for that specific sailing and make sure that you have those documents ready when you board so that you won't have any problem getting on your cruise. So this scenario, traveling without the parents, comes up a lot, especially when the children are traveling with their grandparents. You know, you grandparents love to spoil those grandkids, and taking them on a cruise is a great way to do that. But you want to be sure that you have all of the documentation in place so that you do not get a surprise when you try to get on that ship. So one thing that is going to be required is a signed notarized document. Now, most cruise lines require this, but in particular, Carnival and Royal Caribbean have policies in place to where they're going to want you to provide a signed notarized document from both parents or the parent that has the sole guardianship of the child. And they may also want you to provide certain medical consent forms so that everything is in order in case, worst case scenario, something happens on the cruise. You want to be sure that you can get your grandchild or, the child that you're traveling with the appropriate medical care. So check with the cruise line because each one is a little bit different, but 9 times out of 10, if you are not the legal guardian, they're going to want you to have the signed, notarized document with all of the information that's required. So you would go to that cruise line's website. The forms are usually on there under the document, the required documents. You can do a search for it. You print the forms out and you can either, email them or make a hard copy and send it to them. However, they instruct you to do it on the site. But the important thing is that you want to do that well ahead of time so that you can make sure everything is in order for your cruise. Even when a child is traveling with one parent, Bringing written authorization from the other parent might still be advisable. You want to check with your cruise line to see if they require anything specific, but just to be on the safe side, have that at the front of your mind if you know that you're going to be traveling with your child and the other parent won't be. Carnival, for example, strongly recommends that you have such an authorization with you if you're going to be the only parent traveling with the child. Custody orders, a death certificate, or something like that will be useful if you are traveling with the child and getting the permission or signature from the other parent is not possible. There are times when the parent or guardian of the child will not have the same last name as the child. And so when this happens, you want to be sure that you have documentation that can show the relationship between you and the child. So you want to have that done well in advance of your cruise as well to make sure that if there's anything that you need to get, any additional supporting documentation, that you have time to get it and provide it to the cruise line so that there won't be any mix up or any confusion when it's time to board the ship. Of course, it goes without saying that you're not going to book your baby in a stateroom separate from you, but it gets a little murkier when it comes to teens because a lot of times you think, oh, well, I've got a 15 and a 16 or a 17 and a 16-year-old, and we can put them in one room and the parents can stay in the other room, and it sounds like that's a win-win for everyone, but not for the cruise line. The cruise line is going to have its own restrictions, so you want to check and make sure that you know what those are. For example, on Carnival, they require every teen to be in a room with at least one person who is 25 years or older. Now, that's for Carnival. Different cruise lines have different restrictions, but a lot of them do have restrictions. So, you want to make sure that when you're doing your booking, that you have everyone in the room that they're supposed to be in. So a lot of times, parents sometimes have to split up and maybe mom takes one kid and that's a room of two, and then dad takes another kid, that's a room of two, or however you want to work it out. But on the record, the cruise line might require that you're showing you have at least one 25-year-old in a cabin for every underage person that is in there. There can be age restrictions on children leaving the ship without an adult. On Carnival, for example, children under 16 must be accompanied off the ship by an adult 18 or older in the same travel group. The countries you're visiting may impose requirements beyond the cruise line's rules, including passports, visas, or special authorization for minors. That's why it's important to check the requirements for the specific itinerary, not just the cruise line's general child policy. So those are just some quick tips for traveling with kids. Now, parents, I know I don't have to tell you this because you already know, but kids tend to have a really short attention span and they're going to want to be stimulated all the time. That's why, in addition to these things that are, essential for them getting on board and getting to experience the cruise in the first place, you also want to research fun activities. Now, on most cruise lines, there's going to be no shortage of things for kids to do, especially if you're talking about your Royal Caribbean, your Carnival, your Disney, all of those, or they have robust children activities. So you want to just, look ahead of time so that you can plan and see which ones are, best suited for the children that you're going to be traveling with. And also with the excursions. Now, a lot of times on the excursions, they'll tell you who the excursion is intended for. So you'll see if it's going to be for children, what the activity level is, or if it's something that maybe is not going to be suited for them. So you want to be sure that you read all of the fine print in the excursions before you sign up, because let's face it, those excursions can be pretty costly. So you want to be sure that it's going to be a good fit before you go ahead on and make that decision. Other than that, I really hope that you found some of these tips helpful. If you did like this video in any way, please give it a thumbs up. And if you are into this kind of content, please consider subscribing to the channel. That would really help it a lot. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Bye.